Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us today. This is our webinar on optimizing and cleaning up your Salesforce org with Snapshot. I've got a few slides here. I promise they'll be very quick so we can get to the interesting stuff, which is the actual demo. So the first thing that we're going to do here is we're going to talk about the presenters here. So the presenters, you may know us. Some of you are our customers and some of you are probably new to us, but my name's Tom. And doing the demo today is Sridhar, who runs our technical services team. He's our Snapshot guru, we like to say. So we're presenting to everyone today. So just really quick here, Snapshot is a comprehensive tool for change and release management. So, if you're trying to manage the releases of your Salesforce org, you're trying to migrate changes between orgs, Snapshot is a really comprehensive tool to do that. One of the things that Snapshot does is automated metadata backups. So Snapshot can run automatically on a schedule and take backups, or you can go in and manually take backups whenever you want. And these will take complete and thorough backups of the entire set of metadata for your org. And then you can deploy metadata changes between orgs with Snapshot. So, a lot of release tools have this capability, but Snapshot really takes it a whole lot further, doing comparisons, doing lots of different things that really make it a powerful and fully featured tool. And one of those things that we do is we have over 24 reports that give you a whole comprehensive set of information on your org. And that's what we're really focusing on today. So you can see I've even sort of bolded that point there, but we have security reports, we have compliance reports, and when we say compliance reports, we just don't mean a snapshot of your metadata. We go much further than that, and you'll get a good look at that today. And we also have org optimization and cleanup reporting. So this is what we think really makes Snapshot the most comprehensive tool out there. We give you the tools to back up your orgs, to deploy changes between your orgs, to do that in an automated fashion. But we also give you tools that let you deeply investigate your org, let you understand what's changed in your org, let you understand what's not being used in your org, what needs to be optimized, lets you identify security problems, lets you store and schedule all of these things for compliance. And that really power tool set of reports makes this a really comprehensive tool. Those aspects, I think, are greatly underrated when you look at change and release management for Salesforce. Everyone thinks, well, I got to move metadata from point A to point B. But really, there's a whole set of things that you have to do before you get to that point. And you also have ongoing needs that these reports cover that go, that happen all the time throughout the life cycle of working with your org. So by giving you those as well, we're really giving you an entire tool set to comprehensively cover everything that you need when you're looking at managing the change and release in your org. The last thing that we'll say about Snapshot is we really ramped up our Salesforce DX compatibility. So you can create scratch orgs on the fly, deploy changes in DX compatible formats. So just a highly compatible compatibility with Salesforce DX. So with that, I'm going to step out of the way here and move on to what everybody really wants to see, and that's the demonstration. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Sridhar, and let's give everybody a look at some of these reports and other aspects of Snapshot.
Thank you, Tom. There we go. So you guys should be able to see my screen now. Let's get started. So before I jump into the product itself and start talking about the features, I wanted to quickly echo some of Tom's comments there. Snapshot started about 12 years ago as a simple backup and compare tool for just objects. And back in the day, there was no metadata API. We did everything using the SOAP API. But since then, the introduction of the metadata API and a whole bunch of additions have come through, along with the tooling API and the REST API and such. And we've kind of grown with the development of those APIs. And finally, with 2.0, with the recent release of the 2.0 platform here, we have really ramped up our efforts to not just help you take backups and compare and migrate your metadata. We've gotten a lot farther into helping you understand what do you currently have in your org. what things are being used, what things are not being used, and we're going to be talking about some of that stuff in a lot more detail today. And finally, any piece that you want to migrate over to another org, you could do that and take it to the next level there as well. Not just keep track of those deployment history, but help you generate reports out of that so you can submit auditor documentation at the end of the quarter, end of the year, whatever, to not just show you what things have changed in your org, but also what is the current state of the org, and what are the different pieces and how are they connected to each other and such. So with that in mind, as I was looking through the attendee list, I saw a lot of customers, ex-customers, new leads, Salesforce MVPs on the call today. So I thought I would do a quick introduction. I'm going to change the agenda a little bit there, Tom. Sorry about that. I'm going to do a quick introduction to Snapshot before I jump into the optimization features there. So I'll take about 5 to 8 minutes to talk about Snapshot overview and then jump into it. So with that in mind, when you open Snapshot, this is really what you're seeing here. What org do you want to log in to validate your license and move forward? And as Tom mentioned, in addition to all the other different kinds of orgs that you can jump into, we also have connections with Salesforce DX. So if you want to create scratch orgs or push and pull metadata into your scratch orgs, you could do that. And I currently have everything set up in my developer edition there, so I'm going to move forward with it. So when I click OK here, it authenticates against the org. So we don't do any sort of authentication there. You are still connecting directly with Salesforce and moving forward. So what are you seeing here before you? First, from an architecture perspective, Snapshot is a desktop-based, it's a client architecture essentially. So this is running on your machines. Could be a laptop, or you could have a server running on your data center, or a Microsoft Azure server, or a Amazon Web Services server that is under your control. And then that machine is talking directly to Salesforce and back. So everything is in your control. There is no services that are running outside of your control there on any of our servers or any of our Salesforce orgs or none of that stuff. So from a security perspective, that makes a huge difference, right? And right now I'm running this on a Mac machine here, but you could have just as easily run this on a Windows. We have support for both of those. So what are you seeing here? So on the canvas here, what you're seeing are these blue icons. They are org representations. They could be developer sandboxes. It could be full copy sandboxes. It could be production org, multiple production org. Doesn't really matter. We have the ability to connect to them and then both pull metadata from them and then push metadata as well, right? So again, these blue icons are Salesforce org representations, and these green icons are content repositories. So it could be Bitbucket or GitHub or Git Enterprise that you have installed in your data centers there. It could be TFS, Harvest, Perforce, whatever. Anything that you can reach via the internet there or intranet, we now have the same ability there. We'll be able to connect to them, pull metadata from them, and then using these deployment pipelines, you can see that on the tool palette here, you can actually establish connections between these content repositories to your Salesforce org and Salesforce org to Salesforce org and such. So essentially complete deployment pipelines to migrate from anywhere to anywhere, right? And what do you do with them? You can pretty much do anything you want, for starting with creating a snapshot, metadata backups, right? You are essentially logging into them, whatever, designating your org there, and then you can specify whatever you want to back up, your packages, your profiles. As I click through it, I can select whatever you want. Otherwise, it automatically selects all packages, all profiles, and all permission sets, objects, and you can pick and choose whatever you want. Reports, email templates, dashboards, roles, groups, you get the picture. Anything you want to back up, you can now create a backup of these things. And again, these backups are coming to your machine. So all control resides on your side, right? And as Tom mentioned, all of these backups can be scheduled as well. So you can, in essence, set something up to say, starting Friday here, and I wanted to wake up 3 o'clock every day, every week as I set up here, and then create a backup, right? So going towards a compliance perspective, this is your insurance copy that gives you access to that backup that you can use to either find differences between different stuff, and that's as simple as right clicking and then looking at time series that shows you what really are the backups that you have created in this org, or look at a time series. So I can go back in time and say, I want to start at 216, go all the way to 424, show me a report for custom objects, custom labels, and custom applications. So whatever you select there, you can now see those differences, stuff that has been missing in source because they were created later in the period there, or stuff that has been deleted so that's available in the source there and some of the earlier snapshots, but not the latter snapshots and such. So you can see all of these reports that can all be exported out as well as scheduled, which means anytime you are targeting a production org, anything changes in that production org, that difference in that production org can be collated and then emailed to you, posted on Chatter, or saved on Salesforce content so you can pull it up and look at it at a later point in time, things like that. So automatic notification of changes, which means you don't have to go seek out those changes. They are coming to you. Makes a very big difference when it comes to error handling or change management, right? And you could do that for one particular org using the time series there. But when you connect multiple orgs, you simply right click the deployment and you can do the same thing for multiple orgs, right? Find out the difference between these two orgs, and differences are shown in red, new stuff in green there, and stuff that hasn't really changed are shown in gray here. And you can see this at pretty much any level, looking at custom objects there, or if I want to drill down and see this for individual fields. If you want to see the XML diff, you can see that as well. Simply slide down the slider here. You can jump between these differences and see them at a XML level. And that includes our so famous profile comparison and permission set comparison as well. So again, as a matrix, you can see them listed out, your profiles and permission sets against, in this case, looking at objects here. You can see all the other different pieces, including field level security. Anywhere there is a difference, we color that in red. So for account read write permission set there, it's full access to the account object on one side, but on the other, it's edit and read only. Things like that. So whenever there is new stuff, you see that in green, changes are highlighted in red and such, right? And those things can be deployed as well. So again, right click, deploy gives you the way of identifying these differences and then moving it over. But as part of these, we also mine the setup audit trail so you can see if somebody customized stuff after you have created your backup. So in this case here, I've created my backup on 424, so it's an old backup that I'm leaning on. But then after I created my backup to migrate, so put that in terms of change sets there. After you've created your change sets and uploaded it, if somebody customized your source org, it highlights that for you. So you as a release manager can make a decision whether you want to deal with that or not, right? So let's say in this case, I'm going to decide and I don't really care about those changes. I'm going to move forward. You can pick and choose any parts you want. Again, you see these differences. You can select entire objects or individual fields. And you can do this at pretty much any level there, including for profiles. So you can add or update profiles there. You can even drill down and see this for a field permission level. I can go down and say, okay, I want to make changes to only these field level security. I don't want to kind of keep adding everything there and add only the pieces that I want move forward, right? I can delete metadata. I can deploy metadata as part of that. I can also remove unnecessary references. So if there is any pesky dev test fields you've added in there that has been added to your page layouts or compact layouts just to keep track of all of that stuff, I can remove all of that stuff with a check of a box instead of doing all that stuff manually, right? As I mentioned before, everything is kept track of, all the deployment history, which means nobody can do anything in your org without you getting notified about it, right? Which also goes along with scheduled deployments there. You can schedule this deployment to happen at a particular time and get notified only if the deployment made changes and such, right? So essentially, all I wanted to do is give you a quick overview of Snapshot itself. It's a tool that can help you back up your metadata, view changes within a particular org, or migrate metadata between orgs after understanding the differences that can all be exported out and such. Now, with that said, let's say you've been using your org for a while and you have had customers, request features, and you as administrators and release managers, you've been kind of taking care of these, and we had, administrators go in and out. It's been some time, so you decided, it's been out there for a while. Maybe I need to go in and find out what's not being used, what can be optimized, because you're getting pretty close to the limits. That really brings us to the meat of the webinar here today, and let's jump right into that. Now, before you go start figuring out what's not being used, commonly you would want to figure out what is actually being used, right? And we can do that multiple ways. One of the best ways from a metadata perspective is through our data dictionary. Data dictionary, you kind of understand what a data dictionary is. It's a list of objects and fields, but with Snapshot, we are going over and beyond that, not just giving you a sense of what's being used or not. We can help you form an idea about your summary statistics. How many reports do I have? How many classes do I have in my org? How many objects you have? How many report types you have? You get the picture. Same deal for things like org limits. How close am I to these limits? Right? How much API requests? Maybe do I need to talk to Salesforce support to get that bumped up a little bit, or do I need to purchase some more because I'm dangerously above my limit or something like that? Object properties, field properties that include things like what's the actual formula behind my formula fields, description, help text, whether things are required or not, picklist values, the type of my object there, whether things are encrypted or not, all the way down to your relationships. Where are my objects and fields being used? And you can add anything you want. I mean, for starters here, I've added some Apex stuff here and some reports and report types just for kicks. Let's go in and add page layouts, right? And I'm running this for the account object there. So when I go into preview mode there, it's going to show me where all my fields are being used across various things that I have selected there. So let's go look at my favorite field here, active. It's used in these page layouts, these report types, these Apex classes, triggers, things like that. So with this report, I have a very good idea as to what's being actually used and where are the different references and such. So a complete picture there, summary statistics, how many classes I have, how many pages I have, how many triggers I have and such. My org limits, my object properties, field properties that include my picklist values, whether things are required or not, defaults, and my formulas and help text stuff that I talked about before. And finally, on to my relationships, both from an object side as well as the field side that we saw before, where are things being used. And this is all exportable as CSV, PDF, or HTML, as well as scheduled. So you can say whenever a new snapshot is created or every month, generate me a report for all my objects, get that email to me so I can keep track of my usage from a metadata perspective, right? So that's the positive case. Now let's flip over, put on our negative hat there. Let's find out absence. Where are things not being used, right? That's the real optimization case that we started off to do. But obviously, when you start doing things like that, you need to split that up. You need to kind of look at it whether by metadata as well as data, right? Every admin knows that there are metadata pieces that you might want to optimize as well as data pieces, right? Your objects and fields might be storing data, but some of those might not have been properly filled in. Some of these things might be using the defaults a whole bunch. Let's go figure all that stuff out. Now, towards that end, towards looking at the data first, we have introduced a whole bunch of different reports. Some of these existed before that we have supercharged, and some things that we have recently introduced to figure out their usage. So let's look at field usage. So looking at the data first. So field usage, you guys have all used field trip before. It's a great tool that helps you understand, what the usage is and such. And I'm running this for the account object. But what field usage from a snapshot perspective does is it kind of takes it to the next level. We always provide a lot more information than field trip, but this takes it to the real next level there, where you can actually drill down and see values and what are the distinct values that are being used and what things you need to optimize and such. So we'll let that run. That runs pretty fast here, running summary statistics, and then gives me some data here. There we go. That's done. Now let's drill in. So looking at my fields, my field names, field labels, my types here, and some of these things are summary fields there, and formula fields as well. Total number of records. So I don't have a very big org here. The defaults and the empty values. But the interesting part that we added in here is really coming from this side. Distinct. How many distinct values do I have, and how often is that being used? So let's actually find something that has some decent distinct value. Let's pick the first one here. Which one is that? Billing country code. Okay, this is a great example. Billing country code, it says, 73%, almost 74% default, empty about 10%, distinct values about 8.69%. Let's drill into that. So when I clicked on it, it got me a lot more information about it. And let's start from the bottom. US is the most used value there, 85 records there out of my 115, so 74%. And coincidentally, that's my default, right? The next most used is my empty value. So it helps me identify what's the most used values here and their usage, so I can really see from a data perspective. And this is not a picklist value, right? It is a picklist value. There you go. So you can get this for a lot more information, whether it's a proper string there or a picklist value, doesn't really matter. You can drill down and see that information and make appropriate decision. And this is a picklist value. Maybe I need to off another picklist to identify regions. Now, Western US is bringing me more accounts as opposed to Eastern US, things like that. Helps me make those kind of decisions using the distinct drill down element. That makes for a huge difference. And of course, those can be done for multiple objects, and these things can also be scheduled. So you can just say, run this every, starting from, whenever, run this every month, every 4 weeks, and then send me a data element and things like that. And you can schedule an appropriate time to get that sent you in an email or a chatter element, whatever, and get that email to you. So you don't have to go seek that data. This can come to you. That's from a field perspective. We can get a lot more information there. And the next step there is doing the same for picklist values, right? So fields can give you great information, but what about the pesky picklist values? Because you need a subsequent drill down to see what values are being used, what values are not being used. And I thought I would run this on the opportunity. The last time we ran it for fields, we ran it for accounts. I thought we would do this for opportunity there, where you can run this for all records. Let's do a quick preview. So it goes through all my picklist fields and brings back my data. Let's drill down to the second level and see this information. So looking at stage, everybody's problem stuff there with stage there. So I thought I would start with that. it lists out all my values there. But here is the interesting part. It separates the values out, meaning these are the values that were defined in my metadata, and these were the values that are outside of the defined list of values. Meaning somebody did a data upload, put some garbage values in there. So Snapshot helps you identify those as well, and the number of times they were used, right? And it actually separates that out as well, drills down, and then shows me by record type. So I have two record types defined here: closed up, open up, so that way I can lock down my page layout. So that way, once it's closed up there, nobody can edit that opportunity anymore, things like that. So it separates that out and then gives me appropriate percentages for them as well. So it's a great way for me to get a lot more information about my pick list fields there, because they need a subsequent level of drill down, right? So from a data perspective, this gives you a great start in figuring out all the different pieces. Now, how about the rest of it? We've talked about how to create backups, how to diff and migrate them, and then how to find out from a metadata perspective what's being used, and from a data perspective what's being used, what's not being used. But what about the metadata piece? How do you figure out what's not being used? So for that, we introduced a few reports, starting with our newest report, Forgotten Assets. So this again goes through from a metadata perspective to help you understand what's being used or not. And there's a whole bunch of different kind of things that you can drill down. For starters here, and I can just click on custom applications. It shows me information about my apps, but I just thought it would be a lot cooler to select multiple of them: custom applications, tabs, email templates, let's say groups, queues, profiles. So let's start with that and then run a report. One thing to note about this, as you guys can see this, even though I'm doing this in a small org there, we are now investigating absence, what is not being used. So that kind of investigation does take a little bit of time. So if you are doing this in a large org, you might want to give it a little bit of time. That's really where our scheduled reports comes into play. So schedule that to start, say, when at 1 o'clock at night or something like that. Let that run, take its time, and then come back with the report there. And the output is just pure gold, right? So for starters, what are you seeing here? Custom applications, there's a whole bunch of different applications that are visible, but then it identified another application conveniently called unused application that was created, but since then it has not been assigned to any profiles or permission sets. So it's a great way for us to find out what stuff that has never been opened up to people. And this can be done for custom tabs here. What about email templates, right? By folder, we can now identify email templates that has never been used because they are not referenced by anybody. And it actually tells you where the references are as well. These email templates are used by workflows, networks, approval process, auto response rules. We can go figure all that stuff out, and more importantly, help you figure out those things that are not referenced, which means they are not used at all, right? Imagine doing this for report types and groups and queues, where you can find out that they are not really used anywhere, so you can start optimizing them. Right? Same deal for profiles and permission sets as well. You can find out all the different things that have been created but never really assigned. Right? Profiles and permission sets that have never been assigned to active users, so they are really wasted. We can go optimize all of that stuff, including things like queues. Right? So great ways of figuring these things out, and these can be a detailed report or not. So detailed essentially cuts out all the noise there, and then shows you very targeted, only the stuff that is not really being used. So you're not unnecessarily spending time drilling into a lot more detail. You can now really target what things are not being used, and move forward with that. Right? Again, it's a long running report there. You might want to schedule that, but the output that you get out of that gives you a great way of focusing on what things are not being used. And we are actually compiling a lot more information to add to this, so you can identify those unused metadata and then decide what you want to do with them. Right? And looking at the metadata types here, you can see a whole bunch of things, including field sets and fields and web links and permission sets and profiles, queues, whatnot, and that they do include report types. And when we started looking at this stuff, one of the questions that our customer was asking, our beta customer was asking, we were working with a SI partner who was using this with a large healthcare company. They were asking us, guys, report types is great. Why aren't you doing this for reports or my dashboards? Why aren't you focusing on that? And part of the reason why we didn't want to do that is reports, dashboards, they are more unique than just report types, right? Because reports have been around for such a long time that there could be a lot more reports out there that were, there are no references to these reports as well. You may not have used them in a long time. So you need a lot of different kind of focus there, because you want to find out when they were last used. So towards that purpose, we have a last activity date. So what last activity date does, when I'm looking at reports here, I'll just look at all reports. So it goes through my reports to tell me, what the report name is and where they come from, whatnot. And there are field trips here, as you can see. There are reports that get listed out by last run date, when they were created, when they were modified, who did all that good stuff, last run date, and the last activity. When did you last modify them? When did you last customize them? Things like that, right? So when you look at that, and this can be exported out, and you can drill down and say, I don't want it to run for all reports. I want it to run for only these reports that were created by Tom. You could do all of that stuff. So it gives you a great view to figure out what's really being used, and you can always export them, sort them, and then identify, some of the really old stuff. Great, it's there. Maybe it's referenced by a dashboard. The dashboard hasn't been executed in a while. The report hasn't been executed in a while, but there are still references from a dashboard to a report. So I need to handle them in a different way. And that's really where the last activity date comes into play, where we are kind of super focusing on reports, dashboards, and email templates. So email templates come back here again, because some email templates may not have references there. Some email templates may have references, but may not have been used in these workflows, whatnot, for a while. So multiple ways of looking at your metadata to truly understand what's being used, what's not being used, what's been ignored for a while, and then move forward, right? Make appropriate decisions there. The final thing I wanted to talk about there is drilling into this kind of information. You can also do this for Apex code, right? Select anything you want. So you can look at a particular test class there, and it will tell you not just what the class is, but also just the test class is, but also the class that it covers and how many places that it covers, and the coverage percentage and things like that. So if I go and select multiple things there, and I go to ask it to display my report, it shows me my classes and the actual test methods, and you can turn them on and off, hide methods, things like that, and then my coverage. The coolest part here is looking at, if you need to look at thousands of classes, you can actually decide how you want to color these things. So for starters, you might call low coverage 50%, because I'm doing this for a sandbox there, and high coverage is 75 or above. Or you can just say I really need a lot more coverage. I'm going to set it up to 90% here, and I need to meet my basics here. So it has to start 75%, or I'm never going to get these classes moved over. So you can decide what makes sense for you, and that will recolor things appropriately, right? So gives you a great way of deciding what makes sense for you or not, and lets you make appropriate decisions, right? So to quickly summarize what we've talked about here today before I move on to other topics here, we've talked about how to take snapshots to back up your org, how to find out differences between the same org here so you can get notified when things change within the same org, as well as differences between orgs and identify what things change and how to deploy items. And then from a drill down and start optimization perspective, a whole bunch of information, including a data dictionary to identify what's actually used and their references from an object and field perspective. And from a data perspective, a couple of reports from a field usage perspective and a picklist usage perspective, what's being used, and the drill down into picklist to find out what values are being used or not, right? And then we talked about the forgotten assets to help you understand what things are not being used at all, what doesn't have references from a profile perspective, or queues, or groups, or email templates, report types, uh, whatever it could be, fields, and you could have fields defined that have not been touched by page layouts, not assigned values using your code. It's not used in your workflows. Anywhere there is a reference, it investigates all of that stuff to bring that information to you, right? And you can put that on a schedule to get that information to you over and over, however you prefer, once a month or something like that. And from a last activity date perspective, to understand from a reports, dashboards, email templates perspective, some of these things may have references, but they are still not used. It helps you drill down and seed those information as well, right? Um, there's a lot more information there to drill into. I don't want to bore you by going through all of that stuff, plus looking at time there. One quick thing I want to throw out there is if you want to look at some of the security aspects, we have some security reports that have been recently introduced to help you understand the true security offered in your org to users from a record level basis or a profile or permission set basis to help you understand what's the true security offered to users, right? So that all said, now you've identified a whole bunch of different things, both from a metadata perspective as well as data perspective. What are the different touch points? What's being used or not? How do I actually, optimize them? How do I go delete those pieces that I've identified? That's again taken care of using the deploy metadata. Deploy metadata gives you the capability to actually go in, select anything that you need, be it Apex triggers or assignment rules, auth providers, auto response rules, whatever, be it custom labels, custom objects, fields, whatever you prefer. You can select all of them and then execute a migration that can be validated, roll back on changes. So this is your transactional migration or partial deploy. You can do all of that stuff. And again, all of these things are tracked. So you know exactly who is doing the work and when did they do it, why did they do it, things like that. And the best part about using Snapshot to do that optimization is it does provide a rollback. So just in case you have oops, I messed up, I need to go pull some metadata back in there, things like that. You do have that rollback that can help you to push back the old metadata or remove the metadata that you pushed in. So in case something goes wrong, you have some insurance to get back to a working state, right? That said, wanted to switch over to questions. I hope that was useful to you guys. Let me stop sharing there. Tom, let me get that back to you to answer any questions that got posted.
Thank you, Sridhar. And everybody, just to let you know, if you do have a question while we're talking here, just let us know, pop it into the Q&A, and we'll try to grab as many of those as we can here as we're doing the Q&A. So just a couple of really quick things. This is how you can contact us if you'd like to get a personalized demo of Snapshot, where we can really show you how it can work for your individual change and release needs. Maybe you've got org cleanup or optimization things you're trying to figure out and want to know exactly how you can set it up to work for you. Just let us know. Send us an email at sales@Metazoa. There's our phone numbers and our Twitter if you tweet. Another quick note, we've got a couple upcoming events. Well, primarily Midwest Dreamin'. We're going to be there with a booth, and we're going to be at the Demo Jam. So if you're in Chicago for Midwest Dreamin', come by and see us. We're going to be offering all kinds of tchotchke and fun stuff, and we'll all be educating people about Snapshot. And Sridhar, most likely, will be at the Demo Jam, which is great. And if you follow us on Twitter, we're at Metazoa4SF. You'll see we just got done doing a whole run of user groups and other events, Trailhead DX and things like that. So if you follow our Twitter, we'll keep you appraised of not only new features and reports coming into Snapshot, but also whatever our latest event that we're going to be attending is. So go ahead and give us a follow. And with that, let's get to the questions here. So I've got one here, Sridhar. Let me dial it up here in the Q&A. Okay, how is your forgotten assets different from Salesforce Optimizer, and why would I use it instead of Optimizer?
The elephant in the room, Salesforce Optimizer. That's a great question. So Optimizer is a fantastic tool. It's part of Salesforce and gives you a bunch of information about your org itself. But the issue I've had with Optimizer, and I mentioned, we're working with a large SI that's going through this process here with a large healthcare company who's also a customer. And when we went through that process, one of the first things we found out is Optimizer doesn't go far enough for things like email templates, groups, queues, things like that. It does not give enough information on groups, queues, scanner cases there. You don't get any information at all to tell you what's being used or not. So I just threw out that example there. There's a lot more information that Snapshot provides you to help you make those optimization decisions there as opposed to Optimizer. So if you want a standard feature that gives you some information about fields and here are the first set of reports that work for you, Optimizer is a great start. But for a fully featured product that gives you a lot more information because you're really serious about optimization of your org, I didn't find anything else out there other than Snapshot.
Okay, this is actually related to Optimizer too. They said, I have a lot of old reports that people have stopped using. Optimizer does not flag those or, as they were being used at one time. Will Snapshot help me identify this?
Yeah, absolutely. That was the last activity report that we were talking about for things like reports, dashboards, email templates. Some of these things might be old, might not have been used, but they still have some references. And that's really where that last activity date report comes into play, because you can see when things were last used in reports case, when things were last run, when things were last modified, things like that. So with that in mind, you can decide how best to optimize your org. So again, using Snapshot there, look at the last activity date report, and that gives you that information to help you make your optimization decisions.
Great. So we got another one here, Sridhar. On the forgotten assets, why are some of my metadata types grayed out? Email templates and report types, for example, are grayed out.
Typically, we see things grayed out when they are not part of your snapshot. You didn't find anything there to optimize, so it might get grayed out there. So when you take your snapshots, you can pick and choose what metadata types to capture or not. So take a look at that. Email templates come under forgotten, not forgotten assets. Email templates come under folder-based assets. So folder assets is the tab that you will see in Take Snapshot. So make sure that is selected. And I believe report types come in other assets. So take a look at that as well. And if you can't find them, feel free to reach out to me, Sridhar@metazoa.com, or probably much better, support@metazoa.com. We'll figure it out.
Thank you, Sri. Okay, we got a couple more questions here. Can I remove these identified unused metadata, like email templates, for example?
Yeah, so if you have identified, if you've identified some metadata there, not just email templates, pretty much anything there, you do have the ability to remove them out of your Salesforce org. That's really where the delete assets come into play. So when you are looking at an org there, use the deploy assets to start the deployment process. It could both add as well as delete. So if you leave your additions behind, so don't touch any of that stuff under delete assets. Anything that you select will be removed out of the destination org. It actually lists all the assets that you have captured there, so you can pick any of them and then take them out of the setup. So yes, you can delete anything that you've identified as unused out of your Salesforce org.
Great, thanks, Sridhar. We got one more question here, and that is, does Snapshot have the ability to monitor email alerts that are sent out of Salesforce?
Monitor email alerts. I mean, we keep track of the workflows and email alerts and then tell you what's active or not. That's part of the forgotten assets, but we don't keep track of the email alerts. We'll be able to capture that from a organization limits perspective. If there is a particular scenario you're trying to address, trying to figure out what email alerts are sent to a user or things like that, the answer is no at this particular time. We are working on an interesting feature there, a special report to help you identify exactly that. So, or maybe I'm misunderstanding there. Feel free to reach out to support@metazoa.com to educate me on the use case, and I can drill into this a little bit more. So, ability to monitor email alerts, no, but from a metadata perspective, yes.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. I hope this gave everybody an idea of how you can use Snapshot to clean up and optimize your org. We're giving you a lot of tools there. I really am not aware of anything else in the Salesforce ecosystem that can provide you this kind of data for doing this type of optimization and cleanup. And as we all know, anybody here has ever worked in a very robust Salesforce org, it's impossible to do manually. So some great tools here that you can make use of. Once again, if you'd like a demo, the sales at Metazoa, just give us an email. We'll set up a demo for you and go over any scenarios you'd like to cover. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sridhar, and have a great day.